Today we're moving on to 2.2, which is about modeling adding rational numbers. So in the first module, we talked about adding integers. Now we're going to move on to rational numbers. Just to refresh your memory, remember that we learned at the beginning of 6th grade that rational numbers are any numbers that can be written as a fraction. So that means that we can be working with fractions, decimals, and mixed numbers. Okay? So we're going to look at number line to add rational numbers. Okay, so we're going to first start just like we did with the integers, but we have to be careful because now we're dealing with mixed numbers. Some of them are going to be decimals, some of them are going to be fractions. So we're still going to start at the first number, which is -1 3/4. Okay, so you go to your number line. It's really important that you understand the partitions on a number line. So be careful if you're in the negative direction. Remember, you're moving this way. So we're broken up into fourths here, right? So this one here is going to be -1 1/4. This one's going to be -1 2/4, which is the same as a half, right? And then this is -1 3/4. Let's just continue labeling because we are going to need to know what all these numbers are anyway. Then we have -2 1/4, -2 2/4, -2 3/4, -3, -3 1/4, and then -3 2/4. Now, I'm keeping the 2/4 right now just to help you understand that we're moving by fourths. But if we wrote our answer, we wouldn't leave it as 2/4. We would write that as a half, right? Okay, so we're going to start at our first number, start at -1 3/4, and then we're going to move 3/4 to the left. So we're going to move to the left 3/4 because we're moving in the negative direction, right? So we start at -1 3/4, which is right here. And now we're going to move -3/4, so we're moving 3/4 to the left. So each one of these lines represents a fourth, right? So we're moving a fourth 3 times, like this. 1/4, 2/4, 3/4. And we land on -2 2/4, which is really -2 1/2. So let me write that here first, -2 1/2. Okay, and I just didn't fill this in. Each unit on the number line is a fourth. To add -3/4, we move 1, 2, 3 units to the left. Okay, all right, so that would be my answer. So now you're able to use a number line to add these two numbers. Now let's take a look when we're using decimals. In this case, we're looking at -2 1/2 plus 4.5. So before we do this, we're going to start at the first number. So we're going to start at -2 1/2. And then we're going to move in the positive direction because 4.5 is positive. So we're going to move right. Okay? So we're going on here. Each unit on the number line is 1. It's actually a half, so that's not right. But, okay, this is a half here. 1, 1 1/2, 2, 2 1/2. This is -1/2, -1 1/2, -2 1/2. Okay, I think that's just an error because each one of these dashes represents a half, not 1. So to add 4 1/2, we're going to move from the -2.5. So let's go to -2 1/2, which is here. Be careful, it's not in between the 2 and the 1. It's in between the 2 and the 3. -2 1/2, we're going to move 4 1/2. So if we're in halves, we have to be careful. This is a half. This is 1. 1 1/2, 2. 2 1/2, 3. 3 1/2, 4. 4 1/2. And we land on 2. Okay? So my answer is 2. And that's it. Now, just to throw it out there, The rules apply that we learned previously. The same signs, add and keep. Different signs, subtract and take the bigger sign. So we're using the number line for this lesson, but you can still use those rules. So take a look up here. These two numbers are both negative, so they're same signs, right? So if I wanted to skip the number line, I would use the rule add and keep. So I would take 1 3/4 and I would add the 3/4. So if I have 1 3/4 plus another 3/4, then you can do this however you like. If you prefer, some of you prefer to always change. This is 4 plus 3 is 7/4 plus 3/4, which gives you 10/4. And then when you reduce that, sorry, I can't move my paper. When you reduce this, you get 2 2/4, which is 2 1/2, right? And we said same signs, add and keep the sign. So since they were both negative, your answer would be negative. You would get the same thing. Same thing goes here. This is the different signs, subtract and take the bigger sign, right? So 4 1/2 is the bigger sign. So my answer would be positive. I would do 4.5 minus 2.5. And I would get 2. Same thing. Okay, so how is adding rational numbers different from adding integers on a number line? There's no difference except that we have to account for the fractional pieces of the number. That's it. Okay, so the only difference is accounting for the fractional pieces. Of the rational numbers. And that's the only difference because the process is actually exactly the same, right? Okay, so let's do the your turn together. Let me just see what the guided practice is like, because I feel like let's actually do the guided practice together, and then I'll have you guys do the your turn alone. I think it's a little bit better to practice than what I've been doing lately. So we'll do the guided practice and we'll go back to the your turn, okay? So we're going to model the sum on the number line. So first, where should we start? Where are we starting with the first number? So we're going to start at -4 1/4, okay? And then we're going to be adding 1 2/4. So which direction do we have to move? It's positive, so we're going to move to the right. Is the direction you move positive or negative? Of course, that's positive. We just said that, right? And then what number are we adding to -4 1/4? We're adding 1 2/4. So now we have to decide how can we count those units on the number line. So let's take a look at how our number line is written out. If we had to make the number line ourselves, we're using fourths, right? So we would be breaking up our number line into fourths to make sure we had the right amount. So what we can do is we can count by 1/4 units. Okay? So let's find -4 1/4. So each one of these is broken up into a fourth, right? So this one is -4 1/4. This would be -4 2/4, -4 3/4, -3 here, so this is -3 1/4, -3 2/4, -3 3/4, and let's finish this, -2 1/4, -2 2/4, -2 3/4. Okay, so we're going to start at -4 1/4, so that's just one past -4, and we're going to move 1 2/4. So if I want to move a whole 1, I can just go up to the next section right before the 3 like that. But just to show you, I'll just make sure 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4 would be 1. Okay, this would be a whole. And now that's my 1, and now I have to move 2/4. 1 and 2/4, so 1/4, 2/4. This is my answer. -2 and 3/4. So just to show you one more time, moving 1 and 2/4. So that's 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 1, and 2, 1/4, 2/4. And that's how we land on the 2 and 3/4. And of course, it's still negative. -2 and 3/4 is my answer. And before we conclude, I'm going to just show you how we can do it without the number line real quick. I see that these two numbers are different signs, so I'm going to be subtracting, and I'm going to keep the bigger sign. So 4 and 1/4 would be bigger than 1 and 2/4, so my answer is going to be negative. So if I do 4 and 1/4 minus 1 and 2/4. Okay, I'll show you the way, excuse me, changing into improper fractions. That's 17/4 minus 8/4. Right, because 4 times 4 is 6 plus 1, 16 plus 1 is 17. 4 times 1 is 4 plus, 2 is 6, 6/4. So now we subtract, and we get 11/4. Okay, and to change that back into a mixed number, 4 goes into 11 2 times. That's 8. So 11 minus 8 is 3, and keep your denominator. So we said keep the bigger sign. Bigger sign was negative, so my answer would be -2 and 3/4. And that's how we do it without the number line. Okay? So now let's return back to the your turn. And the number lines have been provided for you here. You can use the number line, or you could try it with the pattern. On your homework, there are no number lines, so you're going to have to draw them yourself. Okay? So why don't you just pause quickly and try these two, and then unpause, and we will discuss. Okay, so I'm showing both ways here. -2 and 5/6 plus -5/6 means we're starting at -2 and 5/6. And we're moving 5/6 in the negative direction, so that means to the left. Okay, so each of one of these dashes represents a sixth. It's good to always label first so that you can try not to mess up when you count. So I'll move 5/6 from here, so that's 1/6, 2/6, 3/6, 4/6, 5/6, and I land on -3 and 4/6, which is really -3 and 2/3, right? I also showed the other way, just using the pattern, which is same signs, add and keep. So I just changed my 2 and 5/6 into 17/6, added them together. I got 22/6, which changed into 3 and 4/6. So again, same signs, add and keep the sign. So it would be negative, and I would still get the same answer. Number 3 was really super easy. This is broken up in halves. -6.5 plus 2 means we're starting at -6.5, and we're going to the right 2 because that's positive. So this is a half, 1, 1.5, 2. And we land on -4.5. Choosing to use the pattern, different signs we subtract and take the bigger sign. So I did 6.5 minus 2, got 4.5. Keep the bigger sign. 6.5 is negative, so we make it negative. Okay? If you're going to do this method for decimals, make sure you line up your decimal points correctly. One last thing before you go and do your work independently, if you want to do the number line for these, you have to draw it yourself. So make sure you look at your denominators or your decimals to decide how to split up your number lines. So for example, this one, when you set up your number line, you want this to be broken up into groups of 3. So if you have -1 here, for example, in between -1 and -2, you want to have 1/3, 2/3, and then that would be your 3. And then -2 and 1/3, -2 and 2/3, -3. -3, 1/3, and so on, okay? So for this one, you look at your denominator and break that up into groups of 4. This one will be 6, and so on, okay? But again, it says to use the number line, but if you start using the patterns right now, that's fine, because if you're able to add and subtract rational numbers, which you should all be able to, because we did it at the beginning of the year, then you don't need to use a number line. Okay, so it's up to you. Okay, guys, I know rational numbers are not everyone's favorite, so try to enjoy yourself. If the number line makes it easier for you, then go for it. Okay, and do whatever you need to do to help you understand. Number line is suggested, but you can use the pattern if you want. Okay, guys, have fun.